The gentle spring breeze drifted through the streets of Strasbourg as 18-year-old Nicholas lived the intensity of youth. The world seemed full of promises and possibilities. It was his last year of high school, and he could already feel the future's transformations. It was at this moment of great expectations that he met Danielle. In an ordinary class, their eyes met, and he immediately knew that this deep-eyed girl would change his life forever. Danielle wasn't like the others. There was something about her beyond her serene beauty. Her presence carried a quiet strength, as if she were constantly absorbing the world around her with a depth Nicholas couldn't ignore. He watched her from afar, insecure but unable to stop thinking about her. Every day in the school hallways was a mix of nervousness and anticipation. One afternoon in the park near the school, Nicholas saw Danielle sitting under a tree, a book in her hands. The moment seemed perfect, and he felt he couldn't delay any longer. He sat beside her in silence, and without needing to say a word, both knew that this was the beginning of something special. The comfortable silence soon gave way to light conversations, which over the days turned into shared confidences and laughter. Their love blossomed naturally, as if it were destined. They spent that summer together, discovering the details of each other's personalities and dreaming about the future. Nicholas wanted to become an architect, while Danielle dreamed of studying pharmacy. Every shared dream seemed more real when spoken next to her. There was mutual trust, a belief that they could face any challenge together. However, fate had other plans. At the end of that summer, when everything seemed perfect, Danielle received the news that would change everything. Her parents were getting divorced, and she would have to move to Bordeaux with her mother. The announcement was a devastating blow. What had been love and promise was now turning into uncertainty. Nicholas, who had envisioned a future with Danielle, saw everything crumble in a matter of seconds. In the days leading up to her departure, every moment felt more intense and painful. They spent hours together, trying to make the most of the time they had left, but the weight of the imminent separation loomed over them. Time was running out, and the farewell seemed increasingly real and cruel. Nicholas, unsure of what the future held, promised himself he would never forget Danielle. On the last night before her departure, they met in the park where it had all begun. Under the starry sky, they embraced as if their touch could prevent the inevitable. The silence between them was filled with pain and hope. When Danielle finally walked away, Nicholas felt as if a part of him was being taken, unsure if he would ever see her again. Danielle's departure left a void in Nicholas's life that seemed impossible to fill. Strasbourg, once vibrant and full of life, now felt like a hollow echo of the memories they had created together. Every street, every corner reminded him of the moments they had shared. He tried to move forward, immersing himself in his studies and architectural projects, but her absence was like a constant shadow, ever present, ever painful. Nicholas never stopped thinking about her. Even while working tirelessly to excel at architecture school, Danielle's image lingered in the background of his thoughts, in the quiet moments of the night. He designed buildings with passion and determination, but deep down, he knew that a part of himself remained with her. The love he felt for her never faded, and each blueprint seemed to carry with it the memory of Danielle. Danielle, meanwhile, also carried Nicholas with her in a quiet, personal way. Shortly after moving to Bordeaux, she began writing in a diary as a way to process the loss. The pages became a sanctuary where she recorded her memories of him and the days they had spent together. Though she was building a new life in an unfamiliar city, Nicholas's absence was a wound she couldn't fully heal. Even as the years passed, life moved on for both of them, but the pain of their separation left deep scars. Nicholas, despite his growing success, never found anyone who made him feel what Danielle had. He achieved recognition as a promising architect, but the emotional emptiness remained a constant companion. No matter how many accolades he earned, in the silence of his nights, thoughts of her continued to haunt him. In Bordeaux, Danielle's life appeared stable and fulfilled. She pursued a successful career in pharmacy and started a family. Yet a part of her heart always belonged to Nicholas. Her diary became her refuge, a place where she could express emotions she could not share with anyone else. Even though her life seemed complete on the outside, the love she had for Nicholas still lingered deep within her, unspoken but undeniable. Over time, the distance between them only grew. Their paths, once so intertwined, had diverged completely. Nicholas dedicated himself to his career, while Danielle focused on her family. Despite this, neither could fully let go of the bond they once shared. The love they had was tucked away, quiet and hidden, yet still very much alive in their hearts, though both wondered if it would ever resurface. Years passed, but Nicholas felt that their story wasn't truly over. In moments of reflection, he wondered if fate would ever bring them together again. Time moved forward, but the love he felt for Danielle remained, like a flame that, though quiet, had never truly been extinguished. Time moved forward, and Nicholas thrived in his architecture career. At 44, he had become a respected professional, with projects in several French cities. His buildings were admired for their elegance and innovation, and he took pride in what he had accomplished. But behind every project, there was a constant: the memory of Danielle. He had never found another love that completed him in the same way, and no matter how hard he tried to move on, the emotional emptiness followed him silently. Nicholas had everything a person could wish for: professional success, recognition, and financial stability. Yet, the lonely nights reminded him that something essential was missing from his life. He often wondered what had happened to Danielle. Was she happy? In the midst of these thoughts, he never stopped believing that somehow fate might cross their paths again. A part of his heart still belonged to her, like an unbreakable promise made in youth. In Bordeaux, Danielle's life had also taken a path of achievements. She built a solid career in pharmacy and was respected for her competence and dedication. Married and the mother of 2 children, her life seemed perfectly balanced to those who knew her. But there was something in her smile that revealed a kind of silent longing. The love she had felt for Nicholas had never completely dissipated, and the diary she had kept since the separation was the place where her deepest emotions found expression. As she wrote in her diary, Danielle relived moments from the past, as if each word could reclaim a bit of the time they had lost. She loved her family, but a part of her always belonged to those days in Strasbourg. Sometimes at night, when the house was quiet and her children slept, Danielle would take out the diary and read the words she had written years ago. They still resonated in her heart, and the thought of Nicholas remained in her mind, like a distant but constant echo. Despite all the years that had passed, Nicholas and Danielle had never forgotten each other. Even though their lives had taken different paths, the bond they had built in their youth was still tangible in their memories. It was as if, even apart, something invisible connected them. Perhaps it was fate, waiting for the right moment to reunite them. What they didn't know was that this moment was closer than they had ever imagined. And so, fate began to conspire for a reunion. Both were invited to professional conferences in Paris, without knowing that they would be in the same city. Nicholas, always focused on work, never imagined that the trip to Paris would be more than just another opportunity to discuss architectural projects. Danielle, on the other hand, saw the conference as a much-needed break from her routine. Neither suspected that their paths were about to cross again, this time in a way that would change their lives forever. Chance, or perhaps destiny, was about to intervene. Paris, the city of lights, would be the backdrop for something they had both secretly wished for over the years. The distance between them, which had lasted decades, was about to disappear. And in the heart of the city, between the noise of the streets and the glow of the lights, an unexpected encounter was about to happen. The reunion that Nicholas and Danielle never truly dared to believe was now within their grasp. Paris was enveloped in a light mist that morning when Nicholas arrived in the city for the architecture conference. The charm of the streets, the hustle and bustle, all seemed familiar, but he was too distracted to notice. Nicholas's mind was focused on his professional commitments, but a strange unease had followed him since he arrived. He felt that something was about to happen, even without knowing what it was. At the same time, Danielle was also arriving in the city. The pharmacy conference she had been invited to was an opportunity to step away from her routine in Bordeaux and dedicate herself to something she loved. The enchanting backdrop of Paris appealed to her, but in her heart, there was an undefined feeling, a kind of nostalgia she couldn't explain. Perhaps it was the fact that she was in a city long associated with meetings and farewells. Both were staying at the same hotel, unaware of each other's presence. However, destiny was already starting to move its pieces. Nicholas, rushing to a meeting, entered the elevator. Right behind him, Danielle stepped in without noticing who was in front of her. She was distracted, looking at her phone, when the elevator began to ascend. Then she looked up and saw Nicholas's reflection in the mirror. The moment their eyes met, time seemed to stop. Nicholas turned slowly, feeling a mix of shock and disbelief. For an instant, they stood there just looking at each other, not knowing what to say. The years that had passed disappeared in a second. It was as if they were back in the days of Strasbourg, as if time had merely paused. Danielle's heart raced. She didn't know what to expect from this reunion, but she knew that the impact of seeing Nicholas again was something she could never have predicted. His smile, still the same, brought back all the memories she had tried to keep tucked away. So many unspoken words, so many emotions stored away over the years. She felt tears forming but tried to contain the emotion, unsuccessfully. Nicholas, too, was paralyzed by the intensity of the moment. He had dreamed of this reunion so many times, but now that he was standing in front of her, he didn't know what to do. All he knew was that the love that once seemed distant was now there, only a few steps away. Danielle's presence enveloped him in a way he had forgotten was possible. The connection between them was still palpable. When the elevator finally stopped, they stepped out in silence, but the feeling that something important was happening was impossible to ignore. Paris, with all its grandeur, seemed small compared to that moment. Nicholas and Danielle had found each other again, and despite all the time and distance, something connected them in an irrevocable way. This was only the beginning of a night that would change their lives forever. The initial shock gave way to a wave of intense emotions as Nicholas and Danielle stepped out of the elevator. The silence between them was loaded with meaning, as if they both needed time to process what was happening. There was no rush to speak. Their presence together seemed enough at that moment. But something deeper was pulling them toward a place where they could finally reconnect. They sat in the hotel lobby in a quieter corner, away from the bustle. The world around them faded away as they focused on what lay before them, the reunion they had both secretly longed for. Nicholas was the first to break the silence, his voice low, almost hesitant, as if afraid that any words might undo the magic of the moment. They began talking about the years that had passed, exchanging stories about their lives, but soon the conversation shifted to memories of Strasbourg. Each laugh, each memory brought back reignited the bond that had never fully broken. Danielle became emotional as she shared how the moments they had spent together helped her stay strong during the early years after moving to Bordeaux. For Nicholas, Hearing Danielle's voice telling her stories was like balm to his soul. He realized that during all those years, he had never stopped thinking about her, and now standing before her, it seemed as if no time had passed. The love he felt for her was still present, perhaps more mature but no less intense. It was as if everything he had built in his life had been incomplete without her. As the night wore on, laughter and tears blended together. They relived the separation, the pain they had both felt, and how that moment had shaped the choices they made. Danielle spoke of her marriage, her family, but admitted that even after building a stable life, Nicholas had never left her heart. The diary she had kept for so many years was living proof that young love still lived inside her. Nicholas remained silent for a moment, absorbing what she had said. He knew that life wasn't simple, and that this reunion didn't automatically mean that everything would be resolved easily. But what he knew for certain was that the love that had never died now had a chance to flourish again. He looked at Danielle with a mix of hope and vulnerability, something he hadn't felt in a long time. When the conversation finally wound down, there was a sense of mutual understanding between them. The weight of all the years apart seemed lighter, and what remained was the undeniable connection they shared. That night in Paris, they rediscovered what they had lost, and at the same time, they realized that true love never completely disappears. It was as if destiny had given them a second chance, and now it was up to them to decide what they would do with it. The following morning brought unexpected clarity. Nicholas and Danielle knew that the reunion had stirred emotions in both of them that couldn't be ignored. The words they had exchanged the previous night still echoed in their thoughts, as if something new had been awakened. Yet the weight of the lives they had built separately also began to press down on them, bringing to light the challenges ahead. Nicholas, despite still being immersed in the euphoria of reuniting with Danielle, knew that the road ahead would be complicated. He was single, but Danielle's situation was quite different. She had a family in Bordeaux, and the responsibility that came with that couldn't simply be overlooked. But at the same time, he couldn't push aside the desire to fight for her, for the love that, even after all these years, remained alive. Meanwhile, Danielle was going through a whirlwind of emotions. She loved her family, but the reunion with Nicholas made her realize that an important part of herself had been buried all these years. The love she felt for him had never disappeared, and now, faced with the possibility of a second chance, she found herself torn between two realities. A part of her wanted to move forward with Nicholas, but another part wondered how this would affect the people she loved. As the day progressed, they both realized they needed to talk more about what this truly meant. Finding lost love was one thing, but rediscovering it and trying to rebuild a life from this point was something entirely different. They met again at the hotel cafe, this time with a more practical mindset. There was a deep emotional connection, but reality needed to be addressed. Nicholas, always direct, was the first to mention the challenges ahead. He knew it wouldn't be easy for Danielle, but he was willing to do whatever it took to be together again. He spoke of his desire to build a future with her, not repeating the mistake of letting her slip away once more. Danielle listened intently, knowing that Nicholas was being sincere, but the doubt still consumed her. Danielle opened up about her children, her marriage, and how the love she felt for Nicholas conflicted with the life she had built. It wouldn't be easy to leave everything behind. However, as she spoke, she also realized that part of her had already made up her mind. What remained was figuring out how to deal with the consequences. By the end of that conversation, Nicholas and Danielle knew that the love between them was still strong, stronger than any obstacle they might face. The decision was in Danielle's hands, and though she still needed time to process everything, there was a growing certainty that fate had brought them together for a reason. They had a second chance, and despite the challenges, they were ready to fight for it. The days following the reunion were intense, filled with deep conversations and reflections. Nicholas and Danielle knew they were at a crossroads. The feelings between them, so strong and undeniable, couldn't be ignored, but the reality of their lives required difficult decisions. Each meeting in Paris seemed to strengthen their bond, but it also brought to light the issues they needed to resolve. Danielle, torn between the love she had always felt for Nicholas and the responsibilities she had toward her family, spent hours reflecting on the future. She talked with close friends, trying to find clarity amidst the emotional whirlwind. Although she knew her marriage hadn't been the same for years, the decision to step away still filled her with guilt and uncertainty. However, the more time she spent with Nicholas, the more she realized that the love she felt for him was a force she could no longer deny. Nicholas, on the other hand, was ready to make any sacrifice necessary. He suggested moving to Bordeaux, leaving his life in Paris and starting fresh by Danielle's side. The idea of such a drastic change, which once would have seemed unthinkable, now made sense. He knew this was the moment to act, to not let fate slip away again. But above all, Nicholas wanted Danielle to make the decision for herself without pressure. During a walk through the Luxembourg Gardens, the two had one of the most decisive conversations since their reunion. With teary eyes, Danielle admitted that she knew the love between them was real, and that despite the responsibilities she had, she couldn't keep living a life where part of her was always stuck in the past. She wanted to be with Nicholas, but the transition wouldn't be simple. Her children especially would be deeply impacted by her decision. Nicholas listened with patience and understanding. He knew Danielle's choice would affect many people, and he didn't want to be the cause of pain for anyone. Yet he also believed that true love, when found, should be nurtured, not ignored. It was clear to him that they had been given a second chance, and he was willing to fight for it. He told Danielle that he would stand by her, regardless of what she decided, but that he would love her for the rest of his life. The conversation brought a new level of clarity for both of them. Danielle knew she was ready to follow her heart, but that it would take courage and honesty, especially with her family. She decided that she needed to talk to her husband and explain the situation before making any final decisions. It would be painful, but she knew she couldn't continue living a life that no longer fulfilled her. With this plan in mind, Danielle returned to Bordeaux a few days later. Nicholas, anxious but hopeful, awaited her decision. He knew the road ahead would be difficult, but he also knew that the love they shared was strong enough to overcome any obstacle. The future was in Danielle's hands, and Nicholas was prepared to wait, knowing that this time he would do whatever it took not to let her go. When Danielle returned to Bordeaux, the reality of her daily life felt heavier than ever. She knew that in order to move forward with Nicholas, she would have to face the consequences of her choices. The conversation with her husband would be the first and most painful step. The family they had built over the years was at stake, and that responsibility weighed on her shoulders. However, she was determined to be honest with herself and with everyone around her. One night, after putting her children to bed, Danielle sat down with her husband and with a heavy heart began to speak. She was honest about the reunion with Nicholas, about the feelings she had long tried to ignore, and about the depth of the love she still felt for him. Her husband, though shaken, listened calmly. He knew something had been different about Danielle in recent years, and despite the shock, he understood that their marriage was no longer what it once was. The conversation was difficult, and the tears inevitably came. Danielle felt guilt weighing on her chest, but also a sense of relief for finally being truthful. Her husband, hurt, asked about the children and how they would be affected. With tear-filled eyes, Danielle promised she would always be a dedicated mother, and that she would do her best to ensure their happiness, no matter what. In the days that followed, the tension at home was palpable. The conversations with her children were even more painful. Explaining to them that things would change was not easy, but Danielle made sure to convey that she would always be by their side, no matter what happened. Nicholas, meanwhile, kept in touch, offering emotional support, but respecting the space Danielle needed to deal with these delicate matters. Meanwhile, Nicholas was preparing for the transition. He knew that in order to be with Danielle, he would have to adjust his own life. The logistical challenges of moving to Bordeaux and balancing his career as an architect concerned him, but he was willing to face everything. What he wanted more than anything was to be by Danielle's side, to build a new life together, and that motivated him to keep going, no matter the obstacles. The support from friends and family was a relief for both of them. Both Nicholas and Danielle found understanding and wise counsel from those close to them. Though the situation was complicated, those around them recognized the deep love they shared and knew that, despite the difficulties, their happiness depended on following their hearts. This support network made the days more bearable, giving them the strength they needed to continue. As the weeks passed, the adjustments in Danielle's life began to stabilize. The separation was inevitable, but there was a sense of peace in her decision. The love for Nicholas, which had withstood so many years of distance, was now stronger than ever. Their resilience and commitment to making the relationship work had been tested, but they were determined to overcome every challenge. What united them was unbreakable, and they both knew they were ready to face whatever came next. After weeks of challenges and difficult decisions, Danielle and Nicholas were finally ready to take the next step in their lives. With Danielle's marriage over and the support of her family, she felt a sense of freedom she hadn't experienced in years. There was sadness over the separation, of course, but there was also a renewed peace. Now she and Nicholas could build a life together, something they had both dreamed of for so long. Nicholas made his final decision to move to Bordeaux. He knew that leaving Paris and the life he had built there would be a great sacrifice, but it was a price he was willing to pay. The idea of starting a new phase by Danielle's side filled him with hope. Bordeaux, with its quiet streets and welcoming air, would be the perfect setting for their love to bloom again. Danielle's children, initially reluctant about the changes, gradually began to accept the new family dynamic. Danielle kept an open dialogue with them, explaining that despite the changes, her love for them would never change. Slowly, Nicholas also became part of this new family structure, earning their respect and admiration. Though the process was gradual, tensions began to ease, and life started to stabilize. The new routine in Bordeaux brought challenges, but also a deep sense of fulfillment. Nicholas and Danielle began sharing the same home, and each day together was a confirmation that they were doing the right thing. Shared breakfasts, strolls through the region's vineyards, and moments of simple tranquility in each other's company were proof that true love had endured the test of time and adversity. Over the months, Nicholas began to establish himself in Bordeaux as an architect. He secured new projects, and although his professional life was in transition, he felt more fulfilled than ever. Being by Danielle's side was the missing piece in his life. Together, they started planning their future, with trips, dreams, and plans to grow old together, as they had always been meant to. 1 year after their reunion in Paris, Nicholas and Danielle decided to formalize the commitment they had made. The wedding took place in a small ceremony in the countryside, surrounded by close friends and family who had supported them throughout this journey. Under a clear sky among Bordeaux's vineyards, they exchanged vows of eternal love. The promises they had made in their youth, though unspoken, were now sealed in a commitment that had withstood time. At the end of the ceremony, as the sun set on the horizon, Nicholas and Danielle realized that despite all the difficulties and separations, destiny had brought them together. They were finally where they were meant to be, together. The journey had not been easy, but the love that had started as a spark in their youth had transformed into something lasting and unbreakable. They were ready for the future, knowing that no matter what time brought, they would always be by each other's side, celebrating their rediscovered love. Nicholas and Danielle's story teaches us that true love can withstand time and adversity. Despite their separation and the different paths they took, the bond that united them never disappeared. Their reunion in Paris proved that even after decades, destiny can bring together those who are meant to be. They needed courage to make difficult decisions, but in the end, they found the happiness that had always been waiting for them. If you enjoyed this emotional story and want to see more narratives like this one, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Hit the notification bell to be alerted about future videos, and of course, share this story with anyone you think will be touched by it too. Together, we can spread more stories of love that inspire, move, and make us believe in the power of destiny. See you in the next video.